Okay, it's showing up as live on YouTube up on my screen here.
Just 1 second. Yeah, we're good to go.
Great. Okay, well, welcome to the May meeting of the Environmental Advisory and Review Committee. And I'd like to welcome a couple of guests that we have. We have Nick DeRuyter from Biosphere Institute, and we have Caitlin Miller from the town of Canmore. Welcome, both of you. And we'll be hearing from you later on in the meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and we start off with the land acknowledgement. And I believe Waverly has offered to provide that today.
Sure, happy to. I'm going to go a little off script. So recognizing that we are in Treaty 7 territory and the Métis Region 3, I wanted to just maybe touch on what that actually means. So we talked a lot about whose land we're on, but I think it's really important because in an environmental committee, we're making decisions or providing advice on decisions that pertain to Indigenous rights and interests because they're about land. And so one thing I was reflecting on was a client recently told me, and I have Indigenous clients only, and they told me that treaties were made for settlers, not for Indigenous people. So that they tell us how, you know, we can live and be on these lands, and not necessarily endorsing it, and I haven't read the whole book, but there is a book called The True Spirit and Intent of Treaty 7. And it is a compilation of oral histories from elders from the Treaty 7 nations. And I just wanted to touch on something that I found really interesting, just from diving into the beginning of this book. And it's that, I guess just to quote here, is that the elders consistently report that the treaty as they understood it was a peace treaty, not a surrender of land, and that they had agreed to share the land with the white newcomers in exchange for resources to establish new economies, education, medical assistance, and annuity payments. So treaties were often established, again, I'm not a lawyer or treaty researcher, but treaties were established, you know, with translators who were from the Crown, who put these things into words. And I think it's really important to realize that that's not necessarily the Indigenous interpretation, and that we have a lot of work to do in establishing the relationships that guide that, but that definitely land-based decisions should go through the Indigenous nations of Treaty 7 and the Métis Nation. And I think with that, I would just encourage us all to keep trying to learn more about that. I will attempt to read this book. It's been sitting on my shelf for a little bit, but yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
It's Waverly. I guess we need to assign the land acknowledgement for the next meeting. Does anybody have an interest in doing that?
I can take it on if you guys like.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, you bet.
Okay, next item of business is the approval of the agenda for today's meeting. So everybody had a chance to look at it? And if so, could I get a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll move to approve
Thanks,
the
Kevin.
agenda.
Second by Ken. All in favor? Show of hands. Thank you. And next item of business, approval of the minutes from the March 14th meeting. Do I get a motion to approve the minutes if there are no changes? But I see Ken raise his hand.
Sure.
Kevin and Ken.
I wasn't there.
Okay, all in favor? Okay, let's move on to Caitlin with some unfinished business.
Great, thanks. And there's not a lot that was left from last meeting. But there was a question from Glennis about which takes precedence, a policy or a bylaw. since the EIS policy and the ERC bylaw were not aligned. So from the research that I've done, the bylaw, sorry, takes precedence over council policy. So keep that in mind. I also spoke with Whitney Smithers, the GM of municipal services or municipal infrastructure, to tell her about the conversation that we had last month regarding the role of ERC in the EIS review and the proposed changes. And she was fully supportive of those changes, and she's forwarded them on to Lauren, who is the head of planning, to incorporate into the next round of updates for that EIS policy. And that's the incorporation of the review of the terms of reference. And so Lauren had been quite busy and then was on vacation, but she will we'll work with her when that update happens. And there'll be a few other things now that the council strategic plan is going to be approved that need to be incorporated into the EIS policy as well. So that is good to go. They've agreed to be a bit more considerate in including ERC earlier in the process, and then just having more of an open conversation around timelines as well. So hopefully that will continue to be a positive discussion and conversation moving forward. And when that policy will be going forward to council, I'll make sure to loop everybody in and inform you of the edits and how that's playing out. And then there was one last thing, Waverly, who had asked for clarification on the circulation of the EIS to the Indigenous Advisory Committee. And I didn't get an answer on that yet. But Bob, you had also circulated something to the group regarding some work being done with the town of Banff on their reconciliation. And so Bob, whenever you and I spoke last week, we thought there might be the potential to have more of a bigger, larger conversation around reconciliation and the EIS environmental world. And so maybe there's a presentation that we could have at a future meeting to have a bigger conversation on this if the group wanted to go in that direction. If not, I'm still going to search for an answer for you, Waverly, but I just didn't get it yet. So I apologize for that.
Yeah, Caitlin, I just thought that article that was in the Outlook that I circulated, I think if I recall the comments we got back from the town with regards to exploring developing Indigenous relationships was more of a put on hold kind of thing. And I think that with Banff sort of maybe taking the initiative, that might be worthwhile for the town of Canmore to collaborate so that, well, number one, it's both towns are doing it at the same time, as opposed to coming to, let's say, the First Nations with two separate approaches. It might make more sense than, if they feel a sense of being overwhelmed by requests, then combining it into something that's collaborative for the Bow Valley might be a good move on behalf of the town.
Yeah, I like that thought, Bob. When I'm working for First Nations, I often go to the regional municipalities instead of the individual ones. So not speaking for the Treaty 7 nations, but I could see that being beneficial. And something I thought of when you sent that around too is we're seeing quite a few, maybe more on the corporate side, but some governments as well, including the City of Toronto's put one out recently. They're putting reconciliation action plans out as documents and then have like concrete actions tied to those. But I know clearly not the same jurisdiction, but the Toronto one I think is one of the ones that's most complete. That could be a reference maybe.
Great.
Yeah, I appreciate those comments, and I can pass those along. I know they're in Caitlin, maybe since you're here on administration as well, and she sits at the manager's level, might have some insight. But I do believe there is an internal working group for reconciliation, and there is some work being done. There's not a public strategy at this point. I don't believe it though. I think they're taking a bit more of a cautious approach, but Caitlin, you might have something to add. Don't feel you need to add anything because that's not why we asked you here. But if you do, feel free. And if not, we can maybe at the end of the meeting, if it wants to be on the list for a discussion in the future, we can determine that.
Okay,
I have nothing to add on that one, sorry.
Yeah, like from council perspective, I think it'd be great to table that at the bottom of this meeting as something to look forward to explore more. Yeah, just with the strat plan we just released and stuff, and part of our relationship goals, one of our 3 pillars, just trying to get right relations with our Indigenous neighbors would be lovely. So let's table that and keep it going.
Great. Okay, so anything more, Caitlin, on the action items?
Nope, that was it for me from the last meeting. Thank you.
Okay, then I guess we'll move on to our presentations. And Caitlin, I think you're up, and I think you're going to give us a bit of a breakdown of the off-leash dog concerns.
There we go. I got there. Can you all see my screen? Sorry, I mostly use Teams, so thanks for your patience there. So I brought some stats today, but just wanted to chat about the role of town, municipal enforcement in human wildlife existence and what that looks like, what our aim is, and what we've done last year and what has happened so far this year. Let's see if this, there we go. So we really focus on education-based compliance. So we want to make sure that while we're enforcing something, people know why we're enforcing it, which is really important when we're handing off an off-leash dog citation. We want people to understand that it's not just for the safety of their dog, but it is for the safety of the wildlife as well. So that's one thing that we really try to hit home with. We want to make sure that our animal control bylaw speaks to that as well. And that when we are providing that type of enforcement, that we're doing so in a way that the person understands why we're enforcing it. There's a lot of times where we get, well, my dog's friendly when they're off leash. And we're like, it's actually not about your dog though. It would be a shame if, another animal had to be either removed or hazed in the case of an interaction with a dog, or if a dog chased an animal into a public area. So these are all concerns that we try to educate the public on and make sure that they understand. And especially during this time of season where, it's been winter for a while, they might not have had an encounter with wildlife for a while, and bears are waking up, the elk are calving. So it's a really good time for us to have that sort of interaction and provide that type of education. So in 2021, this is just our fruit trees and animal attractants stats. So we did have a number of violations, and with a violation, we either give a warning or we actually give a citation. So you can see we had 48 fruit trees citations or calls last year. So it was pretty high, and we do try to do a lot of education around fruit trees within town. So not just through my department, but through other departments. Even at Elevation Place, we have the education right outside so that people walking into our buildings understand, or maybe stop because their kids are dropping off books at the library, and they have the opportunity to see that type of information. Also last year, sorry, it's a little small, but these are domestic animal control stats. So as you can see, the green is the animal at large. So those are the animals that are off leash, and mostly dogs off leash, that we find and have to either capture and impound and then bring back. We also had 5 dog off leash tickets last year. So that doesn't just count all of the ones that are at large versus off leash. Off leash, the owner is usually right there and we're able to talk to them. So that was 2021. And then to start this year, already this year, we've had 35 warnings and 15 citations for animal control. So it's been a busy year for our officers, and we haven't had a lot of resources because we have been quite short staffed, and a lot of our time has been spent on calls about dogs off leash or doing some proactive work. So you can see we had 7 proactive interactions. So that means we aren't responding to a complaint, and 41 already reactive calls where we're responding to a complaint or there's a dog off leash, either in the community and we have to go pick it up, or as a result of an incident. So we also have had 1 warning for someone that was feeding the wildlife. So we do that type of enforcement as well. And then a general wildlife attractant. So there was garbage on property that we responded to and asked the property owner to clean up because it was a pretty big wildlife attractant at that time. Other bylaws that we have include our bird feeder bylaw. So we don't allow people to have bird feeders at certain times of years in order to prevent people from having wildlife attractants out. We have the feral rabbit program that we also administer through my department, where we try to educate people about the feral rabbits and as to why we do have a program to remove them in town. And again, our dog off leash and fruit trees. So the dog off leash is a big one, and anything that we can do to keep getting the word out that it's not just about protecting the dog and it's not about the dog being friendly, it's about protecting our wildlife and minimizing those human wildlife interactions. That's our biggest piece of education, and we work pretty hard with our officers to make sure that they are spreading that message far and wide. We try to get up to Corey Lake. We try to get to all the other off-leash dog parks and on some of the trails too. It's not just in the well-known zones, but people walking on paths and trying to get out there. So we have some joint patrols planned this summer with the RCMP to increase our presence on the trails. And hopefully that'll also increase our interactions with people to help educate them as to why they need to keep their dogs on leash. So that's all for me. Not sure if anyone has any questions today.
Thanks. Thanks, Caitlin. Glynis, you have a question?
I was just going to ask, so the plans to do more sort of proactive talking to people on trails and whatnot, does your staffing currently support that? You said you were short of staff earlier on.
Yeah. No, that's a really good question, Gladys. So we do have 3 new community peace officers starting. So we'll see some waiving throughout the summer months because they also need to go for training. So we have 3 starting in the month of May. It's really exciting. So we'll have a full staffing complement for the first time in a little while. And then one of them goes on training at the end of the month, and they have to go on a 5 to 6 week training course to become fully certified as a community peace officer. So they actually have to leave town for a little bit. So we're trying to spread it out, but it's really great that the training's being offered because it needs to be done by the end of the year. So, and one of the officers that we have hired does not actually require to go on training, so he'll be here full time. Garrett.
Hey, thanks. And Caitlin, thanks for a great presentation. So, and I very much respect the fact that you guys have this balance between citation warnings and citations. And I'm just wondering, how do you guys decide on whether that interaction ends up with a warning or a citation? What drives that decision?
It is officer discretion. So there's a number of reasons that it might be. Maybe somebody who's not a resident that doesn't understand what the bylaw is. Sometimes we take a more education-based approach. That said, if we're stopping somebody, it's usually a longer conversation, and because it is up to the officer who is issuing the warning or the ticket, it could be context within that conversation. But we are trying to switch more now because it has been so prevalent lately to more of that enforcement where you're getting the citation. We've given a lot of warnings and there's a lot of wildlife interaction happening. So we want to make sure that we're driving that message home.
I support that. That's great. What's your capacity? Sorry. Who do you have for bylaw officers?
So currently we have one in the office this week, plus our supervisor. We have somebody on training right now who comes back at the end of the week. And then we have 3 more starting this month. So we normally have 5 officers plus a supervisor.
During the summer or all year round?
All year round.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Jeff.
Oh, awesome, Caitlin. Thanks for the presentation. So in 2021, we wrote 5 off-leash tickets, and then this year we're up to 15 already. Is that correct? So we're at triple, and we haven't even had our first real like long weekend kicking in May. Okay, and any ratio on of those citations being written? Are they local versus visitors? Is it a 50-50 split? I'm trying to understand, like, do we need to up our education for locals, education for all? Just curious.
I think education for all is required. Just based off of, that's not based off of any stat, but more anecdotally, what I'm hearing from the officers is that it's not necessarily just folks from out of town using the trails. There's a lot of locals who aren't following the rules as well. So education for all is definitely something that we're trying to make sure we're asking the officers to do, just as I said, with every ticket and every warning. We've also done some ad hoc stuff with our communications team. So when there's, for example, there was a pack of coyotes that was down by the bow not too long ago. So just sending out reminders, even on social media, that keep your dog on leash for your dog safety, for the wildlife safety. We try to do that when we have capacity to do that as well.
And so are most of the citations on the side of the valley where the Nordic Center is, or is it on the quote unquote sunny side, or is it a mix? I'm also trying to understand where like the highest offending is happening.
You know what, I don't have that stat right on me, but I do a lot of walking. So yeah. I don't know, you probably noticed, but so I do see, and I walk a lot on the sunny side, we'll say. So I do see that there's a lot of dogs off leash on this side as well, even just people letting the leash go and walking next to their dog, or having their dog right off leash. I see it at least once or twice a week.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Ken, you had your hand up earlier. Nick, I see your hand, but I saw Ken's wave earlier, so I'll go to Ken first.
Anyways, thank you, Caitlin. It's awesome information and some good questions there. One of the things that Jeff brought up was it residents, local residents, or people in tourism. And one of the things I was thinking about is, do you have a pamphlet that you can provide for a lot of these rental units? Because they have a package when you come into their units. And I'm thinking that if you had something, we could distribute it to those rental units so that the public at least has an opportunity to review it and see what sort of information is important in this particular situation. For example, dogs shouldn't be off leash while you're walking, and the reasons why, that sort of thing. So I'm just wondering if that has been done or it's been thought of, or what's the status on it?
I'm not sure if it's been done, but Ken, that is a great idea. I've written it down, so I'll follow up on that, and I can even give a little report back to Caitlin for the next meeting. Nick.
Yeah, thanks. I can actually partially answer that. I don't know the status anymore because of COVID. So the last 2 years are kind of a blur on the whole like brochures and that kind of front. But at one point we had, for example, the WildSmart brochures with Pika, the company that manages the Palliser buildings there by the highway. So a bunch of the different rental units with our brochure with information to give to new tenants. I don't know what the status of that is, but because of COVID, that kind of stuff hasn't really been happening. But we could certainly look at doing that again and starting that up again. But that was one way we did get it. Also, brochures and such at hotels and the front desks, that sort of thing. We talk about the Bear Report that they can tell their guests about so that they can find more information. So there is stuff out there. Certainly the last years with COVID, I know with the rental units and brochures, that's probably gone downhill, I'm sure, but certainly can start up again, definitely. Because yes, you're right. Those people coming new to town do need that information or need to know where to find information easily. And I just wanted also, I'll talk more about it later in the presentation, but Caitlin, great to see those stats. I'm very, very excited to see the shift from warnings to citations, because I think it's definitely time for that, because in my experience and the Wildlife Ambassador's experience, obviously the education needs to be for everyone, but the locals are the one that need the kick in the behind, and education just isn't working for them. So I think it's great that we're looking at a little bit stricter rules, and I would love to chat with you offline sometimes about some of those stats, and I'd love to hear about how many actual citations were given out for fruit trees, for the wildlife attractant bylaw and that sort of thing, because last fall, with all those bears being relocated and so many bears in town, bears being destroyed, that's a big one. So I think we need to hammer at that one as well, this year for sure.
Perfect. Yeah, let's definitely chat offline. Jeff, you had your hand up next, I think, again.
Yeah, just a quick question. How much is a citation for an off-leash dog?
Oh, you're gonna make me work. I will look
Sorry,
and
buddy,
get back to you.
like, is it like $10? Is it like $100? Okay.
No, it usually starts at, I'll have to double check, but I'll be able to find it pretty quick. I'll check
Okay.
after everyone's done asking.
And does it work like a sliding scale where like your first offense is one thing, and if you're a repeat offender, it just keeps going up and up? Or I'm just curious.
With most bylaws, they do. I'll double check on this one, because
Sure.
like a noise complaint, for example, the first one you get a ticket and then it's double the second time. So I'll double check on this one.
Okay. And I thought Ken brought up a good idea, and just reiterating what Nick was saying, like part of me wonders if some of this sort of information wouldn't be a bad thing to also go out at the various vet offices, right? So if you're going, when you bring your dog into the vet and there's like a big sign at the front, because now at least we're like targeting the dog owners when they are taking care of dogs. So I don't own a dog, but if I was bringing my dog to the vet and there's like a sign at the front door say, hey, by the way, off-leash dog citation, first one is like $75, or like some sort of messaging there, it could be helpful. Yeah, cool. Just curious. Thanks.
Yeah, not only there, but even with like the Bow Valley SPCA, right? Like,
yeah,
just,
for sure.
Having them, they have a pretty broad reach. Everybody likes looking at the animals that you can adopt, but maybe we could ask them to help with some of the messaging as well.
Yeah, okay, awesome. Thank you.
I'm not sure who is next, Bob or Waverly. Bob? Oh, you're on mute, Bob.
In terms of education, I see some signage around, let's say, the Quarry Lake Dog Park. It shows you where you can be and where you can't be. But where else in town are there signs saying dogs must be on the leash? Like along the Bow Valley Trail on the south side, there's no signs that educate people that way. I'm just wondering if something that's a little more permanent in terms of signage may be a little more helpful as well. You put up these sandwich boards in the last year or two with regards to the hot dog and all those kinds of things. But they're temporary, and whenever I have seen those sandwich boards up, oftentimes the next day they're knocked over. So I'm just wondering if there can be some sort of permanent signage around the town in strategic areas to just continually get that message out. As I think that brochures and advising people in vet offices and the SPCA would be great, but I don't think we're hitting all the people that we could be hitting if we were to compared to putting up something like permanent signage, just like we put up a 30-kilometer-an-hour sign for road traffic.
Yeah, and I do see some pet on leash signs on the trails. They're usually the smaller signs, but I will touch base with our streets and roads on our parks team to see if they have an inventory of what signage is currently available. I know for our traffic signs, we've been talking a lot about when we put up a sign, we mark where it is, because that's usually the problem is we have signs up, but we don't know where they are. So let me take that one away and see if either the parks team or the streets and roads team knows if how many pet on leash signs we have, where they are, and if we don't know where they are, then we can start collecting that information.
Thanks.
And Waverly, oh, sorry, I'll go to Waverly and then Kevin and then Ken.
Okay, thanks. Just to bounce off of what some people were saying earlier, I moved into my Pika managed place last June 1st, and I don't believe I got anything. So that's just to confirm, I don't think that they're going out. Just to add also in terms of places where they could potentially go, there's the dog grooming place that's like in the condo building that I live in. And there's definitely a lot of traffic there, so that could go on the list. And I was also just curious in terms of off-leash areas. The one that I see the most where people have dogs off leash is that like little link between the main Quarry Lake Dog Park and that little one at the pond back behind. Has there ever been like any sort of, I don't know, like little corridor with fencing or anything like very low fencing considered there so people's dogs don't run off into the forest, or is that a no-go? Just interested to see what's been done.
That's a good question. I started with the town in January, so I don't have the answer to that if that's been considered before. Someone else here might know, but I'm not sure.
I'll just jump in, and I don't actually have the answer, Waverly, but I do know that there was a lot of conversation when that dog park was developed, because that was just in the last couple of years, and that there being the two and that connection, and they put stones up and they have all this signage. So I know there has been conversations around that, but again, I also like Caitlin started in January, so I don't know what those conversation details were and what the outcome was, but I do know it was considered, and it has been flagged as an area where people run from one off-leash area to the other off-leash area. But that's something we can check with our parks department, because I think they work a lot with that area and the signage in there.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I'd just be curious to hear what the conversations are. I mean, of course, like you wouldn't want to put in any sort of fencing that would prevent landscape movement and so on. But thank you.
Kevin.
Just to follow up on the signage, and I'm wondering, I know it's great that we have a number of the dog refuse bag stations and the refuse garbage cans beside them, and perhaps if there was small signs made, we could put them on those posts, or they could be put on the posts. Maybe not all of them, but because I know there's a heck of a lot of them. But
yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
I'll pass that idea along, Kevin.
Perfect. Great. Thank you.
And Ken.
I was just going to add to the list. It sounds like it's pretty complete, but even the kiosks at the trailheads, I'm not sure if you have them there or not. I haven't seen any on any of the kiosks, and there's a multitude of them throughout the community at trailheads. So it's people tend to want to look at the maps and have an idea where they're going, and it's I think that's just a good pointer to remind people to keep their dogs on leash.
That's a great idea. Any other questions?
If there aren't any, Caitlin, I wonder if you could stick around for Nick's presentation, and then there might be more collaborative discussions after his presentation as well.
Perfect. Would love to.
Okay, thanks. I guess, Nick, you're up.
Hey, is it working? Do you see my slide? Are we in business?
Hey, we are in business, and listen, let me just quickly introduce this man. Nick DeRuyter is the WildSmart program lead. He's been with the Biosphere Institute for 5 years and is the interim executive director last year for a spell, and very knowledgeable and a great resource for the community about WildSmart, and able to feed into this awesome, generative conversation that we're having today.
Nick,
Awesome.
can
Well,
I
thank you
just-
for that lovely introduction, Gareth.
Nick, can I
Um,
just interrupt you for a second?
Yeah, go for it.
Your screen has your blackout box if it's
Oh.
not the presentation. So I think I'm assuming it's the picture of everybody's blacking out part of your screen.
Okay, there you go. How are we doing now?
Perfect.
Is
Thank
that
you.
better? Sorry. Perfect. Yeah, so welcome everyone. Thanks for letting me chat today and join you today. So for those that don't really know, in short, the main goal for WildSmart is to, encourage efforts by not just Canmore, but the Bow Valley communities to reduce those negative human-wildlife interactions. In turn, you could look at it as saying improving human-wildlife coexistence, because they go hand in hand, so however you want to look at it. But we try to do our best through a variety of education and outreach opportunities for people. And I'm going to just outline a little bit of those today. Sorry if some of you already know this, but for those that may be new to the group or don't know, I just wanted to make sure you know exactly kind of what we do, what we don't do, and what we're kind of hoping to do. And yes, I said do. So what do we actually do? So, a wide range of age groups. We start off with the children all the way down to preschool level. At the Roundhouse and a few other preschool classes, all the way up to grade 12. We do presentations for scouts groups, cadets groups, the summer camps, big Town of Canmore, big fun camp. So, some kids in 1 year, I might even speak to them, 5 times, if they're in different camps or in different classes. So we do get a lot of education for young kids. We've got our adult wildlife safety and bear spray trainings. A lot of that is staff training. For example, Town of Canmore Big Fun staff. In a couple of weeks, I'm training the Spring Creek and Malcolm Hotel staff. I train staff at hotels, Calgary Outdoor Stores. We do training with the inclusion program through Settlement Services for some of the newcomers to Canada when they're learning how to, ski or bike or disc golf. And so we give them some wildlife safety education so that they feel safe and they're prepared when they're outdoors. And we try and take away that fear factor from them, which a lot of them do. They do have that fear. And so we want to try and take away that fear, or at least teach them how they can manage that fear and how they can stay safe. And then we do lots of just even chatting with members of the public. I get emails all the time from families coming through town that want to get some bear spray training or want to learn a little bit more. So a wide variety of the adult education, if you will, ranging all the way up to some of the seniors groups at, say, Spring Creek. Every year I go chat with them and do presentations with the senior centers because a lot of them are very outdoorsy, and Canmore is a unique place where 75-year-old people are in better shape, way better shape than I am, and they're all ex-Olympians, and so we have a really big elderly population that's very, very fit. So it's good to keep them educated and safe for when they're out on the trails. We do community and public events. Now during COVID, that's been a little limited. Things like Bear Day, Trails Fest, all the different races at the Nordic Center, Canada Day, which I heard recently is coming back this year. So good job, good on that. We did a great Love Your Lake cleanup last September with Bylaw and the SPCA, which was awesome. So I had a good chance to hang out with some of the Bylaw folks. And we have pre-race talks. So a lot of the Nordic Center events, all the different races, they have a requirement to do some sort of wildlife safety briefing at the beginning, which we help out with and do those talks for them. Not all of them, but if it works out. We have our weekly bear report that we send out every Friday. We're over 3,400 subscribers this year, which is amazing. So a big group that we can reach. Lots of stuff on social media, on Facebook, Instagram. Our wildlife ambassadors also help with the Instagram and putting stuff out there for people to read that they might not be able to actually speak to in person. Do lots of media relations, interviews with local newspaper, radio, Global TV, CBC, lots of the news outlets in Calgary as well. So try and educate people through media interviews. I mentioned the wildlife ambassadors earlier. So as an example, so these are dedicated community volunteers. Last year we had about 15 that were quite dedicated, and they contributed over 600 hours and spoke with, you know, almost 10,000, so over 9,600 residents and visitors out on the trails and at events. So that's a great help in reaching more people. You can see here in the picture, I have a tool lending library. So we have this, and normally, I mean, people can lend them all year, but normally people only contact us in August or September. But we bought some new equipment, as you can see here, an extendable pole saw pruner that residents can borrow for free to help remove fruit from their trees. So we want to try and make it as easy as possible for them to be able to do it themselves. And so we've got some great tools that people can borrow. We work very closely with the town of Canmore, MD of Bighorn, and the provincial governments, Alberta Bear Smart, Alberta Environment and Parks, just to try and manage everything around here. Obviously, we're an education group, not a management group or anything like that, but we do try and work really closely with all those different agencies. And Canmore is pretty tricky because we have so many different land types and so many different jurisdictions. So it's a very tricky place to manage wildlife and people. And we're also a member of the Human Wildlife Coexistence Technical Working Group, which Gareth will mention a little bit more later. Just wanted to show you another thing we did. We didn't have an in-person Bear Day, so we had a virtual Bear Week in April. So for 7 days, twice a day, we put out new and really useful bear-related content for people. It was videos, research, you know, something. There was a great little interview with Bill Snow from Stoney Nakoda Tribal Administration, some research projects happening in K Country, you know, grizzly bear denning sites, some interesting stuff that we posted for people during virtual Bear Week. Here you can see some of our wildlife ambassadors teaching some of the newcomers with the inclusion program about how to use bear spray. And we do have an advisory committee. We normally meet around 4 to 6 times a year. And we do have representation from the town of Canmore. So Wade Graham on council is on the committee, and from the MD of Bighorn, we have Joss Elford, who's one of their councillors. And we have members from Alberta Environment and Parks and Gareth and myself and a member of the public as well. So we've got a great place here where we can meet. We had a great meeting last week where we can talk about lots of different things happening in the different areas and jurisdictions, and see if we can help kind of solve some of those problems and chat about stuff. And we've got some really good, eager people on the committee right now, which is great. So we can hopefully talk about lots of great things. And that's kind of in a nutshell what we do. And what we don't do is, I mentioned before, we're education based. We do not manage wildlife. We're not enforcement. The wildlife ambassadors are very clear about that as well. And we really try our best to not judge people, and we really try and just educate people and have them leaving with a positive outlook and a positive experience. We don't public shame. One of the things I just wanted to mention as well is about the fruit. So one thing we're not able to do is we just don't have the resources and the people to go out and pick residents' fruits for them from their trees. So that's why we have that tool lending library to try and enable them to do it themselves. So some of the things we're planning on doing, so I kind of touched on it a bit earlier, with last September, all those bears getting relocated. One of the big things I would like to focus on this year is how can we get residents to remove their fruit? And maybe that is enforcement. I feel like we've been doing quite a bit of education already. So it might just come to the point now where we're at that tipping point where the enforcement, is the only way to really move the needle there. Other things we're doing this year is an online education platform. The first module is going to be for the wildlife ambassadors, but we're going to have the Wildlife Champions program where it's going to be online and people can learn all those whys. Why do we stay out of a corridor? Or why should we stay out of a corridor? Why do we need to keep our dogs on a leash? All those why answers will be in that online platform, simple, fun, easy to use. And hopefully people will do that, and then they can tell their friends, their colleagues about it. And then hopefully that knowledge base, that education will spread like wildfire. And then hopefully we don't have to give out any tickets or enforcement. So that's the pipe dream, that's the goal. And I can answer any questions about that later. After Gareth's, and that brings me now. Gareth, go ahead, take it away.
Thanks, Nick. And folks, so like the two Caitlins on the line, I've only been with this organization. I started in January, and I'm very impressed by what Nick in particular has been able to do with WildSmart. It's very much one of our pillars of the biosphere programs. And but that said, like we're always listening. We have this wonderful set of partnerships. And we have the advisory committee, and any advice that anyone on the call wants to give us, we've already heard with Caitlin's presentation, this lovely generative space and some great ideas, and we're wide open for any similar suggestions from this committee. So this slide here is to basically to remind us of this galloping increase in visitation. This is the Kananaskis Valley. You can see the hundreds of cars here. Visitation to Kananaskis Country basically doubled over the past few years to up to 5.3 million last year, and that is a concern for anyone who thinks about the coexistence question. Next slide, please, Nick. And so this document is entitled Human and Wildlife Coexistence. It's recommendations for improving human wildlife coexistence in the Bow Valley, put together by a roundtable. And we're hoping that it's our view that this question of recreation should also be one of those things that's considered, perhaps in an elevated manner as we move forward in our work on human wildlife coexistence. Next slide, please. So we're just going to show this. It's the first 30 seconds is a kind of a news trivia piece, and then it gets into some goods about municipality wrestling with wildlife. And I want you to listen closely and consider as you listen what they're doing, what the challenges are, and if we currently live in a place with those same challenges. Go for it, Nick.
A hiker who went missing in Park County, Montana, has now been found dead. The attack is a tragic reminder that it's time to be bear aware as the animals are starting to wake up from hibernation and move around. A popular bear destination is the Whitefish area, where up to 19 bears alone were spotted getting into garbages last September. MTN's Sean Wells tells us how the city is working toward limiting food sources for bears before a potential interaction turns into disaster.
It's very important that everyone keeps the animal attractants secured, your garbage, recycling, whatever you might have in your space outside.
It's that time of year when grizzly and black bears are starting to look for food sources after a long winter of denning. And Whitefish garbage containers must be stored indoors until the day of collection under city ordinance.
With your current garbage containers, it's very important that you just put them out the morning of and bring those back in. We really want those secured. We do have our law enforcement going out and checking containers. So if you do leave yours out and it's unsecured, then you do risk a citation at this point.
Whitefish City Manager Dana Smith says the city is working on a plan with garbage provider Republic Services to bring animal-resistant containers to residents citywide in the coming months.
We really hope to have something like this in place already, knowing that the bears are awake, but we have a draft addendum that we're working through with Republic Services. We anticipate that'll come to council here in a couple months.
Fish, Wildlife, and Park spokesman Dylan Tabish says securing and reducing food attractants is a must this time of year.
So any food attractants, whether it's garbage cans, barbecue grills, bird feeders, those can attract bears. Bears can smell food from over a couple miles away. And so if you have something with a scent, it's going to come looking for food.
Smith says residents could see a potential tax increase if the citywide animal-resistant containers are implemented.
We are really looking at the safety of our residents and making sure that we don't have an encounter between a human and a bear that is devastating to this community.
In Whitefish, Sean Wells, MTA News.
A hiker who went missing.
Thanks. So let me make a couple of points here. One is that we have things that we need to work on in this municipality, and I would suggest that widespread domestic garbage and bears getting into that is not one of them. And so the short story I'll tell about that, and I think it's useful for for the kind of the theory of change that we have as you know, and how the EARC can kind of move the needle. So back in the day, I was on council till 95. In the years after that, I became aware that Mike Gibault, a wildlife biologist, was mounting this big campaign to with signs and, you know, like public outrage and all that stuff about, because there were a lot of bears dying in the town. And I had a conversation with the mayor at the time, Bert Dick. I just got off. I had been on council with him just up until the year before, and we had a series of beers, basically, with on a couple of nights with Bert and I and Mike. Bert was kind enough to call me the Kissinger of the whole affair, kind of trying to broker a diplomatic solution. And Bert went to his council and said, "Folks, we need to do this thing. We need to institute bear-proof garbage containers," and that happened that same year. And so the domestic garbage problem went away. And we have other, you know, there's other things. There's always things that the town can work on. But there's a reason that people come to Canmore to learn about human wildlife coexistence. We're still a gold standard in this area. With a couple of things, you know, and if we can have the next slide, please. There's thanks, Nick. The town could leverage its leadership in a couple of areas, and one potential thing that would help, I think, and this is the only, you know, in terms of like this first bullet, this notion of the town removing all of its fruit and mountain ash trees from its own land, the better to model, I suppose, to private landowners as we're reaching out to them and encouraging them to get rid of their fruit trees or remove their fruit. So that's a piece. That's a small piece in a big area of leadership by the town. The town could also call for leadership by the province of Alberta, and I've actually been, so the mayor of Canmore sits on the board of the biosphere, and Sean and I have been chatting about, and he absolutely agrees that the Human Wildlife Coexistence Roundtable could and should be doing more than it's currently doing. It should reestablish a technical working group that Nick referred to earlier to execute the recommendations that are contained in that report. It's a great report. We just need to do it. And it's been, we haven't heard from the province since, as an NGO, a not-for-profit, neither ourselves or the Yellowstone Yukon or the Canadian Parks and Wilderness Society have been engaged by the province since 2019. And so we're trying to get that to turn around and accelerate progress on that. The other leadership piece on the part of the province of Alberta could be shutting down pirate trails, these new trails that are unsanctioned trails that are created by mountain bikers, creating better signage, helping folk understand what a wildlife corridor is and how to respect it. And frankly, you know, whether it's the province or the town, all parties could do more enforcement, leveraging the wildlife attractant bylaw or the bylaws that pertain to off-leash dogs. And lo and behold, you know, I wrote that this morning, and we hear from Caitlin that that's already being executed and implemented by the town of Canmore. So hallelujah is what I would say to that. And certainly there's a piece for the province of Alberta too, despite capacity issues and despite how busy everyone is. So that's what we're seeing from our seat, and I'm grateful to Nick for having provided much of the backstory that helps me understand the current situation. I think the next slide basically just said thanks and questions or comments. And Nick, maybe if we can stop sharing the screen and if there's any hard questions, Nick would be pleased to take them.
Yes, Jeff.
Hi, Jeff.
Yeah, well, this isn't necessarily so much a question, but maybe it's a question, perhaps it's a commentary. Like the whole piece, and I don't think this perspective has been maybe like seen for the wildlife coexistence group, but like similar to like the war on drugs, the war on the pirate trails has been lost. It will not be enforced out. Like I just don't, and so but I do feel it can be changed, and I feel what happens is, if we're trying to get people off of those trails, what happens is the existing trail networks need to be improved in such a way that they're deemed an attractive, viable option. Okay, and I don't think that's an impossible thing to do, right? Like I think historically what's happened is that parks has been slower on its pace and perhaps manner and style of trail creation. And so it's just not a desirable alternative for people to want to ride them. And or what happens is the process of bureaucracy has been to this level where it's like, hey, like I would love to work with parks and make a trail. I'm not saying me, but I'm just like an example. I would love to work with parks to make a trail, but that is a process that will take 6, 7, 8 years. And in the meantime, I could just go do my own thing. And when you guys shut it down 2, 3 years from now, no problem. I'll be on to my next big thing. And this is just a reality of the situation. And I really feel if there's some way to really take a look at our current trail network and allow and engage with some of the stakeholders that do use the pirate trails more and say, well, if we could work with our existing trail network and improve it in such a manner that you would appreciate riding this instead of that, I think we would get a lot more buy-in, because I really don't think we're going to be able to force a way out of that. It's just impossible. And I really feel that if people had like a viable, desirable alternative as opposed to what is out there, they would take that, especially coupled with the education piece. But I don't think we're going to get to that tipping point just by shutting stuff down. Like stuff's been shut down before, it gets opened up again. It's this winding circle. And so I think that's like my fresh perspective on what it would take. And it doesn't have to be like, it doesn't have to be to the extent where, you know, we're going to cut tons and tons of new trails. It could even be working with our existing trail network and adding like little features here, features there, elements there that are desirable. And then people, it's like a refresh of our current network. And then people will be compelled to go back to them. That's my take on that.
Jeff, I think that's quite thoughtful. And perhaps a piece of good news that might be coming at us is that we're given to understand from John Paskowski, the Alberta Parks ecologist working in this area, that I think there's been some funding approved to do a trail. I'm not sure if it's a trail master planning process, but it's certainly a revisit of the and possibly kind of this refresh, as you say it, of what's happening with the trail system here. And that's, you know, I like the angle that you're proposing. Thanks.
Yeah, it's like harm reduction, right? Like you can tell everybody like heroin's bad, but like they don't care, right? You got to give them an option. I do feel like what happens is some of the existing groups that have been doing the trails have maybe not had the scope of vision towards creating this type of product that will compel the worst offenders, right? And I think that's a big piece, right? Like if we want to pull those folks into the fold, I feel they need to be brought into that conversation in a manner, and that would make a big piece, because like word on the street is if you kind of, and you know, this is like my sense of word on the street, like the efforts of certain trail groups, they're pretty good, but there is a group of the community that rides that feels left out by what's been done. And until we get that piece come in, we're going to be kind of looping around where we're still looping. Yeah.
So we've looked at another interesting thing that we have Andrew Cotterill in our office, who's an engagement kind of specialist, and he led some really with Nick, he led some really good work on trusted messengers, and basically thinking about messaging that would appeal to the trail runners or appeal to the mountain bikers, and possibly looking at in essence making the communications around this as cutting edge as possible and as kind of impactful as possible using those approaches. Yeah.
And I'm willing to help be a bridge to that group as well too.
Thanks,
so,
Jeff.
Yeah, like Nick or Gareth, if you also want to talk more about this stuff, like moving further. Yeah, it's an interesting thing, because sometimes I look at what we do have in our existing sanctioned trail network, and it would not take a lot to make it to the level of desirability that would really like reduce a lot of our interactions. It wouldn't take much. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I think it could be a very simple, like you said, a refresh and just enhance the existing trails and try to stay away from creating many more new trails, because that's where we're going to get into the problems with the corridors. And then there's going to be no more wildlife here, because they're not going to want to hang out here because there's people everywhere. But I think, yes, I agreed. That's where this online platform is, to try and really teach those people, because a lot of people understand. They're like, yeah, I know I can't bike in the corridor or run in the corridor, but they don't necessarily really know why and how it affects wildlife. So we're trying to teach that why and really create that culture around here that people care about wildlife and the environment and the why. And then coupled with that, exactly like you said, Jeff, try to enhance the existing trails so that they're exciting and everything for everyone, and they don't have to create pirate trails. And then unfortunately, like, I mean, it's not like we can't, everyone wants something, you know, we can't create a trail for everyone. And if they want to find it, then they might have to drive somewhere else to go for a bike ride, which lots of Canmorites or Canmorons, I don't know what we call ourselves. They do that all the time. They drive long distances every weekend to go biking. So that's not much of a stretch, you know. So I think that's kind of a good, it's a great point you brought up, Jeff. And I think, yeah, getting those trails better and getting education better, but in a different way to reach those people that use all those pirate trails and build those pirate trails. And maybe if that doesn't work, then that enforcement piece, and they're not going to be happy about it, but so sad, too bad.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to help bridge those conversations in any sort of way. Yeah, I think a little can go a long way, especially if it's targeted. And yeah, cool.
Yeah, and
questions?
Sorry, go ahead.
Ken, go ahead.
Yeah, just a comment to follow on that Jeff was talking about. One of the things we've talked about is the wildlife corridors, and how well are they marked, or like, for example, a kiosk when you're entering into a wildlife corridor. What is it about? How does it function? You know, you should be developing trails, stay on trails, keep your dogs on leash, those type of things. And I haven't seen a lot of indication of where those wildlife corridors exist. I just see the trails and that sort of maps of the trails. And I think it's good to educate the public, that is your realm, to do a little more of that in relation, working with the city and with the province to get that sort of information out to the public, so that when they are in the area, they know what the limitations are and what they should be doing.
Yeah, and thanks, Ken. There actually, I mean, there is on the actual official designated trails, there is pretty good signage, and I'm just thinking more of the south side right now, because that's where we see a lot. I feel like we see more issues like the Highline Trail. All the connectors in the official trails, there is signage. Now, I mean, there always could be better signage, but the problem is when you have too much signage, it just gets lost on people. And I can tell you this right now, and I'm not trying to point too many fingers at the locals, but you know, when people come visit here, they look at signs, but the locals here, they don't look at any of the signs anymore. And you know, if you go ask a local that's biking on a pirate trail or walking on a trail, they'll say like, oh, I've been doing this for 30 years. This is my backyard. My dog doesn't have to be on leash. It never chases wildlife. I don't have to carry bear spray. I've never seen a bear back here. So yes, I think the signage could be better in places, but it does actually the signage is fairly good on the designated trails. But when people go on the non-designated trails, yes, there's not signage everywhere, but there shouldn't be signage because the people shouldn't be there anyway. So I mean, if you go down that rabbit hole, then you'd be creating signage everywhere. So
no,
it's definitely a tricky situation.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that at all. It's just in key locations is what I'm talking about. And yes, there's designated trails and things that are identified for the public. And yeah, the locals may do their own thing, but the vast majority of the issues come around, I think, is when you get the tourists coming into town and they're all over the place. They're trying to find places to go and they end up traveling into areas they shouldn't be, or riding their bikes where they shouldn't be. And if we can at least start with that, you can't eat an elephant in one bite, you got to take little chunks at a time. And maybe that's where we need to start.
Thanks, Ken. And duly noted. And I think if you haven't noticed, you know, that it's obvious Mick cares deeply about this, and we need to do better. That like we do feel some frustration around this, and we need to we're anxious to kind of crack the nut and move this a bit further. Glynis, you had something to add here.
Yeah, just on the signage as well. Some of those trail signs on the south side, the ones that I see the most, and for within the wildlife corridors, they're actually labeled undesignated and unmaintained trails rather than this area is off limits. So, you know, being really clear about what we're trying to say on the signs might help for those who do read them anyway.
Thank you.
Totally. And I was going to say on that note, even in the north side, so like the horseshoe trails, some of those signs are getting worn out, and like there's seasonal closures that you can't even read on there anymore. And I hear a lot of people saying, oh, well, if I can't read it properly, then I'm just going to go in there anyway, even though they know they're not supposed to be in there. But yes, certainly I think there could be some improvement on the signage for sure, in all areas. Thanks.
Other questions or comments?
I had a question. I don't know if I am allowed to ask questions in this group, but with the biking or the running on undesignated trails, being new to the town and not fully knowing the trail system, I have no idea when I'm on a trail or on an official trail, on a non-designated trail. I have my Trailforks app, and then all of a sudden you're somewhere and it's not in the app. So I'm assuming I must be on an undesignated trail at that point. And so, but it's so intertwined, it's really hard to decipher which is which. And so I'm thinking that probably represents a large portion of the population of not understanding that they've left a designated trail. So I've been thinking that why can't you have with Trailforks or All Trails, these apps that all these people are using to find their trails, just have something that on Google, like rerouting, you're off route, kind of a pop-up to clarify where the trails are. And then my other question is around your plans to grow your wildlife detractant removal, encouraging that program. What do you have any idea what that kind of looks like? And the reason I'm asking is I recently had a conversation with Alberta Environment, and they expressed that their main concern is fruit trees and wildlife detractant, drawing wildlife into the town, and that we need to be making more effort to remove fruit trees, etc. And in that conversation, someone from the province threw out the idea of, well, there's the WildSmart program. Does WildSmart ever do door-to-door knocking? Just, hey, here's a brochure. If you have a fruit tree, the town has an incentive, check it out. Or this is why we're asking people to remove their fruit trees, and just information in that way. And it's really personal, one-on-one, maybe even taking like a community-based social marketing approach to it. So just wondering if that is in the books at all.
Nick, go ahead.
I knew you were going to give me that one right away.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. See, I already know how you operate. So I can answer that. So the first question, yes. I mean, I don't know the ins and outs of all the different apps. One app that has been very frustrating is All Trails. So Trailforks is actually pretty good because it has that main trail, and you can see on your phone if you're off the trail. But All Trails actually has many trails on it that are in permanently closed areas. A great example of that is the Grassy Knob, which you have to access you're going through a wildlife corridor, and it's closed year round to access, but it gets so many people trying to go there because All Trails and other websites say, oh yeah, go to Grassy Knob. For those that are not sure, this is kind of below Ha Ling, a little bit to the east. And basically to get there the whole way, you're going through a wildlife corridor. And so that would be one of those examples where a lot of people go there when even it's a closed area and the signage isn't that great necessarily. But we've been talking a lot about apps like All Trails and even having some sort of safety messaging through the app. So that it's a great thought there, and it is something that we've talked about. Haven't actually gotten anywhere on that yet, but it's something we want to look into for sure. And then for your second question, sorry, Gareth, did you have anything to add to that first question? No. So the second question, so about the fruit tree removal, and yeah, so we have over the years. I've only been here for 5 years. Over the course of the 20 years or so, there has been quite a few rounds of door knocking by WildSmart staff, by volunteers. The door knocking, I'm not a huge fan of it. It hasn't always gone that well. And I know the town of Canmore, we can talk about this offline sometimes, Caitlin, we've got lots to talk about. But I know when there was that bear killed, there was a bear that was relocated from Peaks of Grassy, then it came back to the same backyard to the same house, getting into the same garbage exactly a year later, and then it was killed. And so there was a big thing there where they went door to door through the peaks with door hangers with a picture of the dead black bear, you know, outlining what happened. So we have been involved in that, certainly. I'm just not sure it's the best use of everyone's time and resources, because first of all, a lot of those houses are empty. And I'm talking about just in Canmore now. There's a lot of empty houses. There's a lot of people that are renting, and they're like, oh, I don't own this, so you know, it's not my responsibility. You got to talk to the landlord or the owner. We've had a lot of that. And then you also have people that are super receptive. So it kind of goes across the board, and just in our experience, it just hasn't been that successful. But I'm happy to chat about it. If we have a new strategy, or if there's something specific we want to get across, then by all means, I'd love to chat about it. I know the ambassadors are super keen to do whatever they can to help. And it might be one of those opportunities for other community volunteers who don't want to necessarily go through the training of wildlife ambassadors, but just want to help out somehow. And we can do that. But the only question then is, how knowledgeable do they have to be about the information on the door hanger? Or are they just a body with a friendly face handing a door hanger, you know? So that's where it gets tricky to see who is the right person to do that.
Jeff, did you have something?
No, sorry.
And I know Bob's got his hand up. Caitlin Miller, I mean, you're so important to this. I would just, if you have any questions or comments, I invite that before Bob takes the podium back.
No, I'm just seeing a lot of opportunities throughout your presentation, and to make these connections and to work together to help with that education piece, and we can come in with the enforcement. So sometimes with limited resources, you have to get creative, and I think that there's a lot of opportunity here. So I've just been really making notes and really appreciating the conversation.
Well, listen, I'm grateful to the committee, the IRC committee, for their interest, and anything else you want to send me, suggestions or whatever, let's, and the ideas have not fallen on deaf ears, and I've taken tons of notes, as has Nick. So thanks so much, Bob, for the opportunity.
Yeah, and I just wanted to, Caitlin actually answered my question, but about maybe looking at enforcement opportunities here. If the education's not working, especially with fruit trees, is there an enforcement opportunity that can be looked at? You know, you can only educate so much before you have to bring the stick down. And are there opportunities within bylaw to enforce removal of fruit trees, or is there? I'll throw this back on Jeff. Is there an opportunity for council to look at a bylaw that would make this more stringent for landowners, homeowners as well?
Yeah, there's always a potential to like craft policy. You know, like I do think Caitlin needs to be a part of that sort of thing. She's like, yeah, we can flag, but if it's sort of thing, if we're not able to like back it up in a fair, in a rational way that can actually make it happen, then sometimes it's sort of like an empty thing. But yeah, there is always definitely like that opportunity. Absolutely. Like, so, yeah. Like in China, they shoot your dog the first time you have an offense, right? So, but anyway, that's another conversation for another day. But anyway.
The dog. It's not
Save the dog. But yeah, I jest, but you know, there's, yeah, they're more of an enforcement culture.
Well, I'd like to thank everybody for their contributions today. One of the reasons that this became a topic for the committee this year is I've been on the committee for 4+ years now, and looked at a number of environmental impact statements, and almost all of them, in terms of an environmental impact, identify off-leash dogs as a concern. And this has been going on, I say, certainly in my history with the committee, it's for 4+ years, and we're still in the same spot we were 4+ years ago. Same as the fruit trees. We haven't had much change, and I'm hoping we can move the dial a little bit, hopefully, you know, going forward from this meeting, that, you know, we may not get it all done at once, but I'd like to see some efforts being made by the town to address these issues. And speaking of the mountain ash trees on town property, that's been an issue for the last 4 years, because that's when I first was aware of them. And there was supposedly plans to remove them, but they're still there. So that'd be an easy win, and it would almost be an opportunity for the town to make some publicity out of this as well, by taking those down and making it informed of making it an information exercise as well. So I'm hoping that what we can do is from here maybe prepare a report that discusses what we've been talking about today, and maybe present it to council and put it in front of council for some for their deliberations. But I think we've got a new town council here, and I suspect that they're motivated to work with the environmental issues that we have in town. I'd really like to be proud to call this a wild smart community besides just the garbage bins that we have here. I think we've got a lot of work to do, and I think there is some unintended low-hanging fruit here that we could take on in the short term, and then there's going to be some that are going to be a little more challenging. But I think we should be not shying away from actually making some effort as opposed to just talking about it.
That sounds good. Can I just say one thing, and that's why I also put that little video in there, because it's pretty funny. Like it's almost exactly the same as here, but we are miles ahead of a place like Whitefish already, and you can see that we still have, in the same month of the year, we still had 20 bears getting relocated last year. And so bears and other wildlife, when one food source gets taken away, they find another, and it's almost like a never-ending story, and it's unfortunate, but it does happen. And so hats off to the town of Canmore. We are miles ahead of other places for sure. So we're doing a great job. But yeah, as you can see, bears will find another food source, and we got to address that. And I think, Bob, you said it perfectly. I think if we can maybe, because I get all those phone calls from residents about town of Canmore fruit trees, and so if we can use that and be like, and set that example, I feel like that might be a really good momentum builder. That might help change the needle. I don't know that for sure, but I'd love to try.
Yeah, we could get Caitlin to give a ticket to the town of Canmore for their fruit trees.
That's really funny.
And wrong on so many levels, but yes.
I just wanted to jump in just to touch on a note that you said, Bob, about potentially writing a report to send to IRC. I was talking with somebody, a wildlife biologist with the province of Alberta Environment Parks, and he did express interest in speaking to this group about wildlife and wildlife management from the province's perspective. So we can have this discussion later on about upcoming meetings, but if there was a desire for the group to hear from him before submitting anything to council, we could have that happen.
Sure. One other thing, I know Gareth sent us some information earlier this last month about off-leash dogs, and there was an article about, I think from Sarah Elamigli, about off-leash dogs. It was in a magazine article a few years ago, and then there was a Facebook video of a dog chasing elk down Cougar Creek. I think both of those are very compelling, and I think there should be some way that we could utilize those for if there's going to be some sort of a public education program. But I think I'm not sure if everybody saw that video of the elk being chased. It was quite disturbing to see it, and maybe it's something like that that can shock people into changing their behavior as well. Okay, are we ready to move on?
I just had one question, if I could, Bob.
Sure, go ahead.
For anybody, the funding for all of the signage and that, is that coming through the town of Canmore, or is that through grants, federal, provincial funding? Where's it all coming from? Anybody have an answer?
I don't know if you have an answer. I think it's probably a combination of everything.
It depends on where the sign is, and like I mentioned before, it's a very complicated landscape. So there's areas where it would be town of Canmore, then there's other areas where it would be Alberta government.
Yeah. No, I have a fair amount of experience in grant writing and working with regional districts and communities to generate funds. And I'm just kind of curious how you were working, but we can maybe talk offline on that another time.
Yeah.
So one of the, I mean, so what, because there's overlapping jurisdictions and multiple agencies involved here, both on the enforcement side and also on the education side, like there's, both Biosphere and town of Canmore and the public, the province of Alberta are interested in education around these issues that we've been talking about. Two of them do enforcement. All three of them plus the Friends of Kananaskis Country could conceivably be involved in educational signage. And so it's a complicated ecosystem, and it's becoming a very apparent to me that we must ensure that, and I think I volunteer to take this on to make sure that this important stuff does not fall between the cracks because we're all pointing fingers at one another saying, no, this is you, you should be doing it. Well, you got more money. It's the wildlife deserve better. So I think we absolutely need to kind of crack that nut.
Yeah, because I know in the Okanagan, they have certain areas and they got 4 or 5 regional districts that impact that particular area. So they work with all of them and they try to get grants. And then there's other grant opportunities as well that come out through federal funding and local communities that have some. So there's opportunities out there, just a matter of finding them.
Thanks, Ken.
Great discussion, everybody. Okay, let's go to Jeff for council update.
Can I just interrupt right before Jeff? Caitlin or Nick, if you have other places you need to be, you don't have to hang around for the,
Thank you so much,
the council update.
Yeah, it's not that riveting. Well, actually, maybe.
Well, I mean, you're welcome to stay, but you're also free to leave.
No,
Thanks, everyone.
I got
Now
young kids.
Thanks to you both.
Hugging.
Now I don't need the instructions on how to lock up the building, so that's perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. And Caitlin, I look forward to chatting soon.
Yeah.
Yes,
See you there.
definitely. Great to meet you.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Hey, Nick. Okay, council updates. Is Ms. Mangal still with us here?
I'm here.
Okay, okay, sorry. I just didn't
Yep.
see my who's Rafa?
That's Ralph.
Oh, okay, just checking. All right.
Yeah, it took me a second to recognize him in the waiting room, and I think he might have been there for a little while as well.
Okay, no problem. Hey, Ralph. So council updates, what's going on? Tomorrow is big council meeting. So this was our agenda package that came through. 448 pages. It was a monster. A lot of that is environmental impact assessments for the proposed development 800 Canmore, which is down at the end of 3rd Ave in South Canmore. Bit of an interesting one because the lands in question are a habitat patch. And for some strange reason as well, they also are zoned to some degree of future development, FD. And so there's a lot of weighing in and out. It'll be interesting where council comes in on that whole project and what happens. It's the big one. And it's got a lot of upsides, downsides, and it's not going to be a simple one to figure out. In terms of other things coming up, I'm sure many of you guys have seen this already, but also at tomorrow's council meeting, technically scheduled around 9:30 tomorrow morning, Stone Creek Resorts, which is owned by Guy Turcotte, that's the Silvertip Group, they are coming forward with a proposal for a gondola. Okay, so that's going to go from, well, when I say that's going to go, it doesn't mean it's going to happen necessarily, but the proposed where it's going to go is from down low, possibly, and we'll see more at tomorrow's presentation, stopping halfway up at Silvertip. Okay, and then shooting the rest of the distance up to the top of Lady Macdonald. Okay, so it's a pretty ambitious sort of thing. And there's a lot of players involved. There's Town of Canmore, because when you get to the top of Lady Mac on the backside, that wildland park, now you pull in MD of Bighorn. Okay, there's also Alberta Environmental Parks, and the fact that it is a wildland park designation, and I don't think currently we've ever had a gondola in this province in a wildland park. So there's a lot of pieces, a lot of parts going forward, and this is not the first time a gondola has been floated about. I think what was floated before around 2017, and at that time it came along with a casino as well. I think the casino / gondola idea has been decoupled, so now it's just a gondola. And so if this is something that starts to move and the proponent wants to keep pushing it forward, this will be a prime time for us to be in there, Irk, on terms of reference. Okay, so like it could be coming in pretty hot pretty soon that we are on terms of reference. So just putting that on your guys' radar for that. Okay, and yes, Miss Caitlin.
I just want to flag that I have it for later in the conversation that terms of reference is out. And so once you give your update, we can have a conversation or new business around
Okay.
that.
Yeah, great. So, you guys, that could be a very big thing for, and you guys are smarter than me about that stuff. So you guys get your thinking caps on. Other things happening for council with respect to environmental stuff. Yeah, there's very small groups coming forward with like various initiatives. So for example, I don't know who Hal Retzer is, but he's a lovely citizen in town. And he's part of this group where they were quite concerned that in the winter, there were various retail outlets, Main Street, etc., that even on the coldest days would have their front door wide open. Okay, because the belief is, hey, like an open door means I'm open for business, even if it's like -20. And so that was upsetting. And so Hal kind of went through this whole process. And so they're trying to craft some ideas, maybe push forward on council. Hey, can we create some sort of different policy where, hey, if it's a certain temperature or a certain time of year, please don't open your door, etc. But then, which kind of led to another thing. I was talking with Councillor Graham. I think one of the interesting things here in the town of Canmore, we have so many various groups that do great work, but there's so many various groups. And I was curious, like Caitlin, I don't know if you've like been able to track all of them, but I can't. And they're all like amazing, like BCAG, Bocor, you name them all. And Councillor Graham was curious, like I wonder if there's a way that like these groups could all be kind of like coalesced under like a grander umbrella. Maybe you, Gareth. And but like not like removing like the power of those individual groups, but kind of coming through like a common umbrella. It's kind of interesting if you look at a parallel within the Bow Valley development community, right? They have lots of various interests, but they're all under the title of BODA. And I think sometimes that unification is helpful. And really just curious. There's a lot of pet projects. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, Gareth, down the road. But that's just like a loose thing that's kind of come around some councillors' minds. And that's about it. Lots going on, but those are the things. Oh, and I believe the LPRT, which was the property rights tribunal thing that we've been going on with TSMB, decision will hopefully arise within the next 2 weeks. So stay tuned on that. And that will just, whatever that decision is, it will further kick on the legacy of the next steps of the next steps of the next steps. Yeah. So yeah, any questions about council stuff, I'm more than happy to try and answer as best as I can. Glynis.
Just a quick comment there, Jeff, on page 302 of that package is this committee's, I just looked, is this committee's report on the South Canmore lands on the EIS, because we looked at that last year. So just wanted to draw your attention in all that paper.
Yes, well, I saw it, and it was interesting because like when I talked with Bob about this on the phone the other day, like it was more like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it was more of like check mark, like, yeah, they talked about this in the term of reference, but I don't think you guys are at that point empowered to more influence in terms of reference. Is that correct? It was kind of like, yes, this, yeah. But I also like I echo the other parts. So I really appreciate here where you're talking about your concerns about the gradual incremental erosion of habitat and the cumulative effect piece, which I don't know if you guys got a chance to see the MSIS, which was Town of Canmore's third-party reviewer that reviewed the proponents, and they echoed the same sentiment that, we don't necessarily agree that there are negligible, like low to negligible effects of this proposed development. And so that was great to see that IRC kind of independently came to that same conclusion as MSIS did as well.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is check marks, but that the suggestions to council column is where we were able to put a little bit more nuance in.
Yeah, no, I mean, thank you. Like they're all great. Like all this stuff here, like for the, yeah, it was a doozy. Yeah. Any other questions or comments, guys? Would love to hear more.
I can just provide clarity on Hal. I think he's with the
Hal
Bow
Retzer.
Yes.
Okay.
I believe he's with the Bow Valley Clean Air Society. And they're bringing a proposed closed door bylaw forward to council, or the recommendation that council recommend that administration put forward a closed door bylaw. So that it's coming June 7th, I believe, tentatively booked in for. But I agree with you. I had to ask some of my coworkers here because there's a BVCA and then there's a BVCAS. And I was like, oh, did they just forget the S? Like, is that it's a typo, but two totally different groups. So I agree that there's a lot to keep track of. So.
And I think that there's a bit of a power in their flying and they're like a common flag.
Yeah.
Because even for like from a council perspective, like it's really hard for us to keep track of it, of all that stuff, of all these great initiatives sometimes. So
well, let me just quickly comment on that since it's and so one of the I recently and this is relevant, although it seems not particularly relevant, but I just recently resurrected the notion of green beers in this town, which we hold on the last Friday of every month at 5 o'clock at the Wood, and one of the reasons to do that is to permit a networking amongst all of these groups who are volunteer driven. They have capacity issues. If they have any staff, they're overworked and underpaid, and it's a chance to get out and see what they're doing, and maybe so. Jeff, maybe you and I were overdue for a beer, possibly or you could watch me drink beer because I know you don't drink, but at a Green Beers, because there's a rich legacy and there's like decades of developed, kind of history associated with the groups, all of these groups. BVCAS, for example, for almost 30 years has been holding Lafarge accountable for its greenhouse gas reductions to the very best of their ability. And Hal Retzer's probably done more than any other Canadian to reduce greenhouse gases because of his advocacy work with Lafarge, because Lafarge is such a huge emitter. So there's that, right? And so, should they be part of some of? So there's a great conversation. They're happy to have that.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, my main thing is that if it helps drive like initiatives forward more efficiently, maybe it doesn't have to be, but I just think it'd be great. And even just for the community at large to like understand them, like we're all the nerds and we're having trouble like tracking what everybody does. You can imagine like general person on the street would resonate with a lot of these things, but they just don't know necessarily who the necessary groups are. But yeah, tomorrow big meeting, and that's what's going on. Yeah. Anything else?
Thanks, Jeff. We just go around.
There's richness, biological diversity is a good thing, and having all of those different organizations and organisms in an ecosystem, and the same might be said. In fact, it's my feeling that having diversity in a social ecosystem of groups that care about wildlife or nature or kind of the Bow Valley Engage has its unique value proposition. So I'm not, you can tell I'm leaning away from kind of like the great unifying theory of environmentalism.
That's fine. Yep.
Yeah. Great. So I'll just go around the table. I'll start with Gareth. Anything new else?
I'll flash it up. I'll drop it into the chat here, just a link to our upcoming expo. We're one of the initiatives that we're pushing these days is to convince all of you, just like Waverly, to make your next vehicle an electric vehicle. And I've seen Waverly in a great little video put together by another BVCA group, the Bow Valley Climate Action Group, and so connected with that, we'll have an expo of electric vehicles, courtesy done in partnership with the town of Canmore at Elevation Place, and on the 28th of May from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And I'll drop you a link.
I'll have my car there too, Gareth.
So good. Thanks, Waverly. Looking forward to meeting you in person.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I'll stick with Waverly. Do you have anything else that you would like to speak to?
No, just that. I was just on a week vacation and drove out to the coast and back in the electric car. It was the easiest thing I've ever done. The BC network is really great, and I think we all have some lessons to learn from it. But pretty much any time that the dog needed to go for a pee or anything like that, there was a charging station and I could just stop, and it was never inconvenient. Sorry, Jeff, I think I saw your hand.
Yeah, totally. And I think this is just kind of like just fitting in, and I was curious, maybe Caitlin could help with this. Like, there's an email that came out earlier today. How can we as a group help facilitate the I don't know what to say, the conversation, but like the implementation of some of these charging stations. So for example, what happens, I got a message from a constituent and she was expressing her frustration. She lives in this condo board. She lives in this condo place. She's like, I got an electric vehicle and I want to charge it. But everybody else in the condo is like, well, we're not going to like start putting resources towards like cultivating a charging scenario at this, at our condo. And she said, well, why not? It's like, well, we're old. We're not going to be around here much longer. We're probably not going to buy another electric. We're not going to buy another car. Why would we want to do that? And like, how do we like help like move that conversation forward? And I was curious, like, yeah, and like Miss Van Gaal, like, is there stuff we have on the town side, like on like incentives or grants or like FAQs, or like, I'm curious because maybe moving forward down, maybe there's some policy stuff that council might have to explore as well. I was just curious on your end. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that, and I did see that email, and and I was talking with Amy, and we're going to formulate a response.
Love it, thank you.
Her. And it's a great question, and it's a big problem. Underground parking, if it's not built to house an EV charger or level 2 charger, it's pretty difficult and expensive to put it in after the fact. So you really want to do it initially, definitely. And so we when there's pre-application meetings for any development in town, Amy or myself, and Amy, you've all met Amy, will put in the recommendation that they should put in EV chargers where possible, and that indicates that's where the market's heading and that it's in their benefit to do that. But we cannot mandate that. It's a bit of outside of our jurisdiction to mandate those things. The building code's kind of the minimum, but the federal government did, I think it's just in draft form or pilot.
Still in draft, I think.
Their new building code, which has the phases, and I believe there's 5 phases towards achieving net zero. So I haven't had a chance to read the new proposed building codes yet, or what it'll look like, and to see what the EV aspect of it is. So I can't speak to that, but I'm really hopeful that that's part of that. And the other thing, we have some funding this year to look at kind of an EV strategy for Canmore, and it's not specifically where is the town putting EV chargers on town land, but more in a residential, commercial sector, like how to map that out. Where's the most potential? What should that look like? And where are those gaps? And the multifamily complexes are definitely gaps, but how can we encourage multifamily complexes to put them in? And so what does that look like? Is that an incentive program, like you said, or whatnot? But so there'll be more to come on that. I don't want to speak too out of turn on that. Amy's very much leading that. So once we draft that response up, I can circulate it to this group so that you all have that information as well, just for curiosity.
And maybe you have more insight. Any like ETA on when you think the federal building codes will be released? Like they were supposed to go in 2020, and here we are, like 2.5 years out.
I know that they've been sent out, so all the provinces now have them. But what I'm unclear, this just happened like the last month. I am unclear of them being sent out means that the provinces now have their 18 months or whatever to put them in place, or if there's a comment period on them. So I'm not sure where exactly being sent out means in that process. So, but they all do have them, and so they are public. We can go on the website and look at them. So they're just not adopted yet by all provinces, but there is a commitment with the provinces to be consistent across Canada in building codes so that trades can operate anywhere and your same standard and quality living everywhere. So I'm hoping that'll come in the next year or two. Like, it'll take a while to adopt, right? But
Yeah, I
And it's
know.
worth- it's worth noting, like I noted that there's like the guts of the strategic plan of the town of Kenmore is like really just 3 pages, and building codes are mentioned in one of 3 pillars, which is the environment pillar, which is really cool. And nothing happens with building codes until the other shoe falls, which is our province adopting a building code of some kind, and that is not a given. And so there's a possibility, Councillor Ma, of some thoughtful advocacy around that.
yeah,
From coming through possibly the AUMA and the rural municipalities, because that would be, just saying.
so there was the province did previously have on their website the requirement to adopt any new code within 18 months, and I've heard that that's no longer available. That statement's no longer on their website. I haven't yet to go look for it myself, so if you find it, I could have it could have changed. And so there are some groups that are teetering on whether advocacy for the adoption of the codes at this point with an upcoming election just strategically is, do you want it to become an election issue if we push on it? So you'd hate to see it do that and to the detriment of it, I guess.
That's fair.
Yeah. So anyways, that's
Thank you.
If I could
Timing
just
is everything.
add
Timing is
one-
everything.
on that note, it was forwarded to me also, and I'd be happy to chat with her. But the most recent federal budget came with a fair bit of money for the ISEP program, and then there's a different acronym for the charging one. But a few of the major charging companies actually apply for that funding, and then you can like get it through them. They're being quite clever about it. I only found this out through work, but it is public. And also just like I saw that in her case, one of the things that wasn't working was the climate argument. And I think in that case, like something that's really come up at my condo board is the property value, right? Like if everyone's going to have an electric car in 10 years or something, we better have some way to charge it if people want their property value to stay.
That's a great argument. That's going to attract them incentive. Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to Ken. Do you have anything?
No, just that I'm finished skiing for the year. I'm tired.
There's still a couple more days left this season.
Oh God, there's a couple more. I'm done. I'm
That's
pushing over 120 days. So, one thing I wanted to bring up in this environmental aspects for wildlife was the interface between fire management, fire smarting, and wildlife habitat, and how that might work to enhance wildlife habitat and yet keep people out of the area and bring wildlife to a certain area where people aren't. Just something for the community to think about whether or not it's worthwhile pursuing.
Might be interesting to have that conversation with a wildlife biologist from the province if we want to go that route, because I can't speak to how adjusting habitat one area influences, but those people would be able to say that stuff.
The reason I brought it up is I had a good walk with the city's fire smarting contractor. And there was lots of signs of wildlife habitat. I've got experience in that as well. And it was really good to see, the area being fire smarted around houses and communities. There's some great value. The difficulty comes down around where you've got crown land, private land, resorts, all of that. It creates an issue sometimes. But it's what I saw I was pretty impressed with.
Kevin.
I think we're going to listen to all this. I think we're going to have our hands full with environmental impacts of gondolas and the 10 trains per day of passengers coming out through Canmore to Banff and so on. And so it's going to get pretty busy.
The train thing's kind of fallen off the radar recently, so but we'll see.
Or the rails.
The rails, actually, thank you. It's
Yeah.
fallen off the rails.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting, this gondola business, because not only is, we just heard recently, of course, Edmonton, they have a plan for a gondola in Edmonton, now Red Deer,
Mhm.
and now Canmore. So the gondola companies must be marketing.
Yeah. Yeah,
Anyways,
it's a thing. It's a thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess that's it for me.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks, Kevin. Glynis.
Only thing of note is tonight is the AGM for the Bow Valley Green Energy Co-op. So I'll be attending that as a member.
Thank you. And Ralph.
I really don't have much at this point. Sorry for being late, and I'm just looking at an electric car charging in Edmonton and an underground parking lot here, and trying to figure out how I can connect to that.
So appropriate.
Yeah. Thank you.
Is that because you're going to the game tonight?
No, I wish, but no. I'm just gonna hear the rowdies, I think.
Yeah.
Hey, Bob, there's been numerous references to electric vehicles, including from Ralph, and I've dropped a few more links into the chat, including a webinar that's coming up on 2 nights. The future is electric, and some resources that I hope folks might find useful that we've curated on our website regarding electric vehicles.
Thanks, Gareth. Okay, moving on to new business. Is there any new business from anybody?
I had a couple things I want to bring up, if that's okay.
Mhm.
I'll try to do it quickly. I recognize we are running short on time. And I've alluded to them earlier already. So the first thing is the Silvertip gondola terms of reference. So that is public right now. This is a terms of reference for the provincial environmental impact assessment. So this is not for the town of Canmore's environmental impact statement. So the gondola, as I understand it, needs provincial approval. And so there is some conversations happening with the planning so that any environmental work kind of covers the town's environmental impact statement work as well, because the environmental impact assessment is a much larger process and program than the EIS the town has. So the town has been sent the terms of reference or asked to comment on the terms of reference, and we have our comments back by June 13th. And so planning has circulated the terms of reference to MSIS, the third-party reviewer, for comment, just to ensure that it aligns with the EIS policy and the EIS process, so that any information that comes out in the environmental impact assessment that goes to the province would cover what we would be looking for in the environmental impact statement. So there is an opportunity for ERC to look at this terms of reference under the context of this is a provincial terms of reference, but we want to make sure that it addresses any information that we may want to see come from that, because they might be using that one document for both approaches, for provincial approval and then municipal approval, because it would supersede, it would have a higher level of detail than what we would ask for. So if ERC is interested in that, we can do that. There is no process officially for ERC to be involved, because it's technically not for council to be making a decision. So we don't have templates to fill out or anything like that. And this is the first time in 40 years there's been such a kind of request go forward provincial with the different parties involved in the way that it currently is. So talking with planning, there's the opportunity for ERC to review it. You can note which point within the terms of reference you're commenting on. So like 6A thinks that we need to address this or whatever. So we could do it in a written format, or you can take notes yourselves, and then we can have one of the planners come to a meeting, and we can have a conversation with her to share our feedback. And that would get incorporated into the town's response to the terms of reference, along with EMS's review and the planning department's internal review. So if there is interest, we can do that. I just want you to be aware that it might be a bit clunky because there's no official process for this type of review since it's not an EIS. And that you also have to be just cognizant of how your input will be considered, given that it's a provincial terms of reference. And so if there is interest and you feel you have time in the next month, we can do that. The third-party reviewer is scheduled or saying that they'll have their feedback by May 20th. They just reported back today to say that they would have the 20th, have it completed. Planning needs to have their feedback all by the 13th of June. So potentially if we want to host an early June meeting, we could invite planning to it. And still give her a week or 10 days to take what we say to her in that meeting and put it into something presentable, I guess. Not that it won't be presentable, but you know what I mean. Phrase it in a town response.
I think that would be valuable for the committee to take a look at that.
Okay, so you would like, I can send you the link right now so you have it, it's online. But then I'll send it in the meeting minutes as well. So you'll have it again.
I would certainly appreciate, from a town council's perspective, see what Irk would say about the terms of reference, because even if there is provincial approval, there's all the other pieces that have to, go pass through Canmore, pass through MD Bighorn, and so I think having your guys' insight right off the get-go would be really helpful. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it'll be valuable and good to have, just with the understanding that it's not going to be necessarily a clean and clean process for us, because we've not done this before and we're not quite sure how it's all going to play out, but might as well take a look at it and provide your comments. And do you prefer to have it all written down, or would you like to sit down with the development planner and just talk it out with her?
I think if we have a meeting early in June, with the planner there, then we have a chance to propose something.
Okay.
Who's a planner on this file, Caitlin? Is it Lauren Miller or?
No, Tracy is the one who's putting it together.
Okay.
Yeah, but she reports to Lauren. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. So we'll include that for the June meeting.
And I think that's the next item on the agenda, the schedule.
Yeah, I just had one more thing I wanted to talk. Oh, sorry, we're really late. I apologize. A presentation from Alberta Environment and Parks. If we wanted to have the wildlife biologists, give a presentation to the group about the information and the trends and what they're noticing in terms of wildlife, and they're looking more at like wildlife, bears, cougars, etc., and how they're moving throughout the region, and then sort of how we play within that. I can set that up, but I'm not sure if we could do both that and the terms of reference conversation in one meeting in June, so it might get pushed. And then I know that you typically break for summer, so I don't know if something to think about. And then also the reconciliation. I know we want to have conversation on reconciliation and what the town is doing to do that, to help address that question that Waverly had. So I think that's a whole other meeting and topic. So I guess the group can decide how we want to prioritize these topics in the upcoming meetings.
Well, it looks like the EIS is the one that's most pressing. So maybe we put that one on the next month's agenda. And I'm not sure if anybody's interested in meeting in July and August, depending on people's availability.
So I want to give a shout out to Caitlin's leadership. The conversation from the parks ecologist, it would be highly timely given, I mean, this committee's we just did a really good deep dive today on all things wildlife, and but we're not there yet because we don't have all things, because we don't have that perspective and what's actually being noticed from an ecosystem point of view. I think that'd be a great piece, and I for one would be happy to kind of make extra time somehow, some way, possibly. Well, because right now it's such an important time to get that roundtable back up and running, or not, but hopefully we can. And so I personally am eager for that sort of information.
Would it be possible to do maybe a 3-hour meeting in June instead? We can cover both of those.
I would prefer a second meeting. like I'd rather do like a second standalone meeting. I'm happy to meet twice in May, twice in June, sort of thing. I think the two topics are like separate enough that for me to give like really good attention to them, to keep them distinct would be helpful for myself. But I also like defer to what you guys believe as well too. Mm-hmm.
I'm okay with 2 meetings.
I guess I'd have a preference for Zoom meetings, just given some travel and whatnot. But happy to have 2 meetings because I think they're both important topics.
Just a point of clarity, in the past, when you provided comments on a EIS or terms of reference or anything regarding the EIS, was it done in a formal ERC meeting, or is it a separate informal meeting?
We usually had it at one of our meetings, one of our monthly.
Okay. I was just wondering if we put the wildlife one within the formal June meeting and then had in late May an unofficial meeting, but we can do 2 meetings and then maybe break for summer.
Well, let's start with that. Let's pick some dates here, and then we can move forward.
So the first, just to start, I guess the first Tuesday in June is the 6th. And the following Monday is the due date for the report for the EIS or the EIA terms of reference. Is it just to give planning enough time to actually take our comments and provide them into the town's response? Would the 30th of May, like moving it ahead a week from May 6th or June 6th to 30th May, be reasonable? That gives 4 weeks for ERC to review the terms of reference and provide comments. The terms of reference, I'm not sure how many pages it is.
Yeah, that would actually be preferable. There's at least 2 conferences happening in the Valley that week of June 6th. So that's kind of a no-go.
Okay. The terms of reference is 11 pages. So we're not asking for a 400-page document review. Sorry, Jeff, had to rub it in.
Yeah.
That sounds good. I like that idea.
So the May 30th works for the next ERC meeting. Okay. Yep. And then do we want to try maybe something June 13th or June 20th to get the wildlife biologist?
Not the 13th for me.
Not the 13th. June 20th?
Works for me.
Glennis, I saw a little.
I think I can make it work. I'm just not quite sure, but one person can't hold it up. So let's go, because I think it's important to do it, and I'll try to make it work.
Okay.
Yeah, what time would the meetings be on the 13th? Because I have another meeting at 6 o'clock that day.
It'll be the 20th.
So 20th will work, perfect.
Yeah, and it would be the same time, I would think, 4 to 6.
Yeah,
Can I just float something here with around the 27th of June? Because I just have a question mark about the 20th date. I may or may not be here. Is the 27th possible for folks, or is that all else being equal?
That's worse for me, but
Yeah, me too.
Okay, let's keep it at the 20th. And look, I have, as you know, I have a brilliant staff person, and that's fine. Thank you. And it'll be recorded on YouTube. So there you go.
Caitlin, will that meeting be in person, those two meetings?
I would think, I mean, I guess it's sort of dependent on the group, but based on some of the conversations I had, and with surging COVID case numbers and with external guests coming in, I'm not sure where the provincial member is located. It might be easier, and if people can't make it, to have the recording for the time being to remain online. But ultimately, it's your group and your decision as a collective what works best. So
I think for now, we should just stick with Zoom. Like we were planning to attend in person this meeting, and I'm down with COVID. So I think it's still rampant, and maybe it's just it's more of a healthy decision to just stay online for now.
yeah, well, and if that's okay, we can do the 2 Zoom meetings for the end of May and end of June. And then if we break for summer, that give you 2 months, and then maybe come back in September, and we can look at in person at that point. If we're still in this, I think we've got other problems, but hopefully we can do that if everyone agrees.
I don't even know what it would be like to be in a live meeting anymore.
I know. I'll have to stop wearing my pajama
Vancouver.
pants. What's that?
Oh, sorry. I went to one in Vancouver. It was crazy. It was like everyone forgot the pandemic existed.
Yeah, I think easy to forget. So, and about the June meeting, I will reach out to my contact with the province to confirm that date would work. And then if not, I'll send an email back to the group, maybe put a doodle poll out for another time that might work with his schedule as well.
Sounds good. Okay, if there's nothing else, I ask for a motion to adjourn. Thanks, Glynis. Okay, everybody, we'll see you guys at the end of May.
Right on. Great work, guys. Thank you so much.
Okay, take